Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Hello, folks. My name is John Mason, and welcome to Downtown with John Mason. We've taken our show off the street, where this winter we interviewed people on the street to get an idea what they're thinking about. This is our first in-studio interview, and with me today is longtime Hartford community activist Ned Coll, who at 74 is not showing any signs of slowing down. Ned, thanks for coming. For those unfamiliar with Mr. Coll, his work was inspired by his Jesuit education and President Kennedy, who asked not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Do I have that right so far? Yep, and sure what Mr. Coll has been doing ever since then the creation of the Revitalization Corps is what he started in 1964, I believe. It's an anti-poverty agency dedicated to promoting racial and social equality. Today, Mr. Coll is working out of a Hartford church where he continues his work. Mr. Coll, thank you for coming. And let me start with this question. After 50 years of activism, do you ever wake up in the morning and say, give me a beer and a lawn chair and set me down by the lake, or are you still going strong?
Well, I think the country has the wrong idea, and I'm surprised too, because it's happening to me. As a person gets older,
wow, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep it rolling. Let me just shut this off, and I will shut this off right now. You were saying as a person gets older, what?
What wisdom is, if your spirit's alive, and prayer helps you to keep a spirit alive, you get stronger because you're in the home stretch, and we're not born to die. We're born to be called.
Mm-hmm. And your theme seems to be God activism. What does that mean?
Well, it's simply getting spirit out in front of everybody in this nation and state, and God is the spirit. God's not a statue. God is a spirit. People with good spirit have God in them, but they are called to do actions too. Okay.
And what have you? What are the problems facing us here in Hartford? Is it a problem also throughout the nation? What do you see your fight as? What point are you trying to get across to people?
Well, one big problem you have in Hartford is the people that control Hartford, nobody knows. And
when you say nobody knows, what do you mean? Like
they're don't not know who seen.
They're not seen.
And it's the top.
But how would you? I'm going to ask you some questions on how you can solve the problem also. So they're not seen, so we don't know who to go to for our problems, or if we have a question. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they don't want you to know. And I think the people that control Hartford are top of the insurance companies and the top of places like UTC. And they have a massive effect on secular media.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you get to those people? How do we rectify the problem? How do we, become more aware of who's running the show, and how do we make, decisions that can change things?
Well, I think you project an image, and the image is that this is a sole Hispanic city, essentially, with other people certainly asked to be involved. And you go to the people, and the stronger the people get, then the top has to react to us.
You talk a lot about apathy and how the fact of the matter is that people seem to be removed from what? What do you, when you say that, what are you saying?
I think most people have been numbed. They don't feel they can do anything, and they're basically essentially pretty good people, but they don't think they can do anything. And the strength of the whole Kennedy message, particularly John Kennedy, was that you can do something and you're called to do something.
How do you unnumb someone? How do you change someone to care, to to want to make a difference, to get involved?
Well, they got to see people with setting example, and they got to see my people out there. They got to, and they also have to look at the greatest activist in the history of the world, the life of Jesus Christ. I mean, Christ was an activist. I mean, anybody was an activist who was Jesus. He's the focal point of human history.
On that note, you've been quoted as saying in some of the articles I read that you're a prophet. And what do you mean by that? How do you describe yourself as a prophet?
Well, a lot of people have a weird idea of what a prophet is, but basically, and I certainly did, but a prophet is somebody who's basically seeks to bring out love and goodness in people and inspire faith in people. That's the first role and the essential role of a prophet. On the other hand, a prophet is supposed to speak about sin. And we're a society that has forgotten about the word sin. And the Ten Commandments are all based on not sinning. So we have to...
I'm in trouble. I just wanted to tell you that. Go ahead. Well, let me interject something real quick. In an interview you did 8 years ago, you described yourself as pro-life, pro-God, and pro-involvement. Do you still hold those same beliefs? That's pretty much who you are?
Yeah, well, yes, and I live it, and I have to live it because you just don't say some of the things I've said without having a personal relationship with God.
Who influenced you?
Well, the biggest influence way back was Kennedy and King and people like the late Millard Fuller, because I was one of the founders of Habitat for Humanity in Georgia.
How about your father? Was he an influence?
My father was a major influence. He wrote a book called Beams and Dreams, but my father was not a wealthy man. He was a postal worker, but while there and that night he wrote a book called Beams and Dreams, which is poetry that people understand. It's not abstract.
What did he teach you?
I think one of the biggest things he taught me was that ingratitude was the worst sin. And we are a blessed country and we are a blessed people, but that always hits in. And plus, he lived in a legacy of going through the First World War and being mustard gas and all the suffering. But he led by example, and we have to lead by example, and the greatest example is people who are Christians out there, but not only that, but we have to, the one thing we're not going to is the Bible, and the Bible is the map of human history.
You were born in Hartford, one of 7 children, the youngest child of 7, the only boy. I just want to know, did you get beat up a lot by these sisters? Did they give you a hard time?
Well, actually, they taught me a lot because I had to fight back. And when you have all those...
I mean, I'm talking headlocks or full Nelsons or jumping on you.
They weren't beyond doing anything. They weren't mild little sisters. But they taught me to fight back or else I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fighting back, you've been arrested, I don't know how many times, maybe you know, but for promoting your message, for trying to get your message across. I guess I've talked to other activists, one being Art Laffin, who's from Hartford. You know Art. Yeah. Chris Duchette, who's from, what's he with? He's in Hartford also, Jack and Chris. Is that part of the job that comes along with activism is the not the threat of being arrested, but the reality of being arrested and for what you fighting for?
Well, for one thing, I don't like being arrested because you still have to go to court and it's a pain and it takes you off. But you've got to expect that. It comes with the territory because you're standing up against the establishment. And certainly somebody like Art Laffin has. And he's taught me something in the beginning because in the beginning I was not talking enough about the effect of defense. The spending on defense is having on our society, and we're spending too much money on defense. Although I do still see a need for defense, but we're spending too much money.
Has your theory on things changed through the years? I had read where you had a religious conversion about 2 decades, 1990, where let's say you said you heard a voice telling you God was angry at America for its greed. Tell me about that and what.
Well, that was a 4-hour experience which I wrote about in the Hartford Current, and I will say to anybody listening out there, I heard Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ showed me scenes of good and bad people in this country. And he was particularly concerned about the greed at that point in 1990. And he said he would help me. And Jesus has helped me right now. And Jesus has helped me all through the 20 odd years of God activism. And Jesus will help anybody who asks him.
There's a part of me that thinks it almost sounds like a breakdown of some sort. You don't view that as a medical, like a problem. You believe that to be a real vision from above, and that you didn't suffer anything.
Well, I started God activism when I walked 6,000 miles for a spiritual conversion of this country. People have forgotten. I mean, the idea of a breakdown, anybody who hears from Jesus, there's a lot of people who hear from Jesus, but you have to talk to them. But I heard clearly from Jesus Christ. And and the effect of it is how the program has grown with just like Christianity has grown with very little money.
Okay. In the past, you've had a habit of writing some pretty confrontational letters, city, state, and religious leaders. Critics have called you bombastic and angrier as you get older. How do you respond to that? How do you let me ask you this. What response do you want from, say, an archbishop or a city official when you write to them and say, get off your ass and do something about XYZ? Well,
I try to be positive in my approaches. I really do. But on the other hand, you're supposed to speak out against evil, too, especially on a prophetic calling. And I do that because basically the force...
like the mayor of Hartford or a councilman or a legislator, they're not necessarily evil. You're just disagreeing with what they're doing or lack of doing, correct?
No, I think some are evil.
You think some are evil? And evil in the sense of what?
Well, because they think they don't think anything about the Bible. They don't think anything about Jesus. They think a lot about themselves.
But does a person necessarily have to believe in Jesus for you to feel that they're doing a good job? I mean, could a person be a Muslim or an atheist and still do a good job and really you be supportive?
Well, I certainly think a person could, but I do think that the people that should be shouting the most about Jesus are the Jews, because of the fact that all the prophets prophesied Jesus.
Okay. You've been married twice. You got 2 grown children from your first marriage. How has the activism life affected your relationships through the years? I know you've walked maybe hundreds of miles. If I was to tell my wife I'm going on a cross the state walk, she would say, leave your paycheck home. How do you justify that? How do you tell Mrs. Coll that, oh, by the way, honey, I'll be gone for the next 2 weeks? And did you get the support to do that, or was?
Well, no. Basically, people know who I was when they married me. On the other hand, that when you really get into the spiritual, that's on another level.
Okay.
And that's on a level that it's I mean, for example, here I am, a college grad. I've won every award in America. If you check on it, including one of the 10 outstanding young men in America. I ran for president of the United States.
Let me stop
wait a minute.
Okay.
Let me answer the question.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the strength of what I've done is basically, if you added up what the kind of money I brought in, the Revitalization Corps owes me about $1.5 million because most of my work has been virtually volunteer.
Okay. We've got 1:30 left, and I want to ask you about that award. In 1970, at the age of 30, you were named one of the 10 outstanding young men of the nation by the U.S. Commerce Chambers, along with a very famous recipient. We have a picture of that. If you look closely, we'll see Mr. Coll in the middle in the front row, and to the far right, we see the king of rock and roll. Now, what was it like to share that award with Elvis Presley?
Well, I actually got to be friends with Elvis.
Yeah.
And I was a guest down at Graceland along with the other people. And Elvis was a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
Now, and not only that, I think, contrary to what a lot of people think, I think Elvis is far more spiritual than people think and far more patriotic. Or he didn't have to go into the service, but he was a patriotic guy. But I think a lot he came from the South, and I think a place like Memphis, you have different roots than in a lot of New England.
Were you impressed? Any one thing stand out about him in addition to his religious or spiritual background?
Well, one thing, he had a sense of humor. For example, when he was first introduced to everybody who also won the award, and I wanted to see if he had a sense of humor, I said, Elvis, isn't it? and to see if he had that, and he laughed. He caught it, and he saw there's one guy in here who's just not kissing my butt.
Yeah, good. All right, we're going to wrap up our first half with Mr. Ned Coll, and we'll be back for the second half. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about.
Hi, I'm
your
Paul
business
Willis,
and
host of the Grassroots
Business.
Business Journal
Okay.
on
For
accesstv.org.
the LLC as a
We have a segment called Pitch Your Business, where small business owners have the opportunity to give a 3-minute elevator pitch about their business. If you are a small business owner, need to get the word out about what you offer, then you need to put a face with your business on the Grassroots Business Journal segment, Pitch Your Business. You can contact me, Paul Willis, at 914-222-3771 or email me at paulw.sales@accesstv.org. Get World Wide Web business exposure. Be seen on the social media links like Facebook or Twitter. So pitch your business, the place for small business marketing needs.
Hello, folks. It's John Mason again with Downtown with John Mason. We're here for our first in-studio show with the legendary Ned Coll, community activist. We spoke earlier about Ned's earlier career, his theory on life, his feeling about girls. Just kidding, Ned. But I wanted to ask him this. In the 70s, and I'll never forget this photo of you in the ocean offshore with a group of African-American kids. And you became famous for storming private beaches with boats of inner-city kids to protest shoreline towns from banning non-residents. What was the reaction from beach homeowners, and were there any shots fired?
Well, I had a worker cut up, and we don't know who cut the worker up in the cabin that we had for inner city families to come
Worker,
down.
what do you mean worker cut up?
Somebody went in and cut her face.
Cut her face.
And
Okay.
God knows who did it, because nobody's ever found the person.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, the shoreline should be open to the public, and you have like 4 miles of Connecticut shoreline open to the public and should be open to everyone.
And what was the reaction from homeowners? I know there must have been some angry response, but did they say get out of town? What exactly was the exchange with? You know what? Not only the exchange, but do you think that changed anything?
Well, that's a good question, because there has been some people who think that the shoreline is wide open because there's been some votes on it here and there, but I don't see it wide open. I think what it did do is, I found interesting, is the amount of support I got from people who are non-inner city who were upset about using that shoreline. Basically I call Connecticut Corrupticut. Corrupticut,
Yeah.
Because it's away from the roots of Reverend Thomas Hooker and those who started Connecticut. There were religious roots and there were simple roots. Right now, I just think what's going on in much of Connecticut, particularly out of Boy Malloy's office, who's anything but El Grasso, and certainly out of the mayor of Hartford's office. We don't have any spirit and we don't have any drive. And that's up to people to demand it of themselves. If people become alive, then the politicians become alive.
I guess that goes back to my earlier question. How does someone become alive? You're an example, and I think Ralph Nader talks about this a lot too, is this apathy and getting people involved and making people aware. How do you suggest we do that? Just you know.
No, I think one of the things would be good to turn off television for a month. Because television has ways of making people, their whole life revolves around the next weather forecast. But there's a lot of subliminal stuff in there. A lot of crime shows around there makes people afraid to go out. We got to get out. We got to get out and meet other people. We got to become a happier and more spirited state. And you can't count on a lot of people, but you can. A small group of people can change America.
Let me get back to the beach experience. You know, I'm a homeowner on the beach. I paid a lot of money for a cottage. You know, I worked, you know, a good part of my life to get that cottage. Don't I have a right to say who lays on the front of my beach, or who can come to that piece of land? What do you say to those people?
Well, for one thing, is the shoreline is Connecticut's largest natural resource, and that should be open to all the public. As simple as that. You know, I mean, that shoreline basically has been usurped from people, and that should be used by all. And I'm not against private ownership of property, but people should have a right to use their own natural resource. Give me a break.
Yeah, okay. In the past couple of years, you've been demonstrating with homemade campaign signs, standing up for your beliefs, gotten arrested, you know, a few times. Has there ever been a time where you said, you know, I got to change my ways? I mean, this isn't working anymore at this age.
Well, what's this age crap? I mean,
well, I feel like,
I mean, the wise men weren't kids.
Yeah.
Wisdom comes with age.
I know.
And if you're connected with spirit, I mean, thinking about age is corporate thinking.
Yeah.
It's got people conditioned about that,
Yeah.
especially in the insurance capital of America. But spirit, God is a spirit, and He drives people on.
Yeah.
And I look forward to getting older.
Yeah. Well, I guess just not to belabor the point, but I guess I thought as you get older, you get more tired. You like to you don't like the inconvenience of being in a police car. You don't like the inconvenience of confrontation. I know we spoke about the Archbishop was what do you call it? Inducted? Is that the word? Or
Installed?
Installed. And you were up there and you had gotten arrested for, what was the initial reason for going up there, and what did you try to achieve, and how did that play out?
Well, one thing, I'm a firm Catholic, and I think that the church in general, I think the Catholic Church is the true church, but the book I have on saints is honoring Martin Luther. So the fact of the matter is all religions have to become more alert. And I think that we have to look, and we have to ask ourselves, where are the heroes in our society? Where have they been? How come they're not coming forth?
Yeah, let me stop you there.
I think they've been deadened.
Who is your hero? Who is today at this point in time?
Well, certainly one of my heroes is Ralph Nader. I mean, people forget about that, and they forget about their heroes. But look how many lives he saved, and he's also from Connecticut. But Millard Fuller, a guy who started Habitat for Humanity and gave up all sorts of money to do that, is a major force in my life, and so is Nelson Mandela.
Let me go back to Ralph Nader. From Winstead, a local, from Connecticut. Started out in Hartford, I believe, as a lawyer for one of the insurance companies. I could be wrong, but I don't. Did you know him back then?
I never knew Ralph Nader. He lived right in Winstead, and we've never met. But I have a respect for him.
Okay. Let me just throw a few names out to you, and I think we have a photo of you as a younger Ned Coll. Your views on Robert Kennedy and your relationship with him.
Well, I know Robert Kennedy the best of all the Kennedys, and I think people forget that what the Kennedys did was go against things because they came from great wealth. And I think that Robert Kennedy would have changed this country if he ever lived to be president, because he had a real fire in his belly, and he made people really think about racial division. And Robert Kennedy was deeply loved by people I work with in Harlem and Newark and other parts of America.
Yeah, how about former Governor Ella Grasso? What was your relationship with her?
I was the special advisor, unpaid to Ella, and I think she should be called Saint Ella Grasso, because Ella Grasso knew the dangers of politics. and she kept a distance from that. She was an extremely holy woman, and that's why I call her a saint, because she went against the whole. She vetoed twice the abortion bill, and I can see why she did, because what we're really saying with abortion is that we've got a right to go against the Fifth Commandment, which was given to Moses, and that's why history is so important in my work.
How about the late Hartford Archbishop John Whalen?
He was a good guy.
Yeah.
He was humble, was not overly impressed with the position, Archbishop. In fact, I wrote to the new Archbishop about him today, because he was a great example in my life, but he was humble, but at the same time, he was a good example to me, because he knew I was challenging him and criticizing him in the press, and when I'd see him about it, he said, "Well, I see you saying a few things about me."
Do you have a favorite priest? If you were to say, this is the guy that I identified, this is the guy who I think,
Well, the best priest that I've met in America, Father Charles Jacobs, pastor of Holy Trinity Church in Hartford, because he really lives it, and he lives the Spirit, and he lives Christ, and all the hierarchy and all that is fine, and he's certainly in love with the Pope. But he really lives it. And people who had any brains, they'd be flocking in the Holy Trinity Church in Hartford for Mass every day at noon, like I try to.
Okay. What a lot of people don't know, especially younger people, is that in 1972, you ran for U.S. president. During a televised presidential debate, you waved a rubber rat to decry urban poverty. And I remember that article. Tell us about that incident.
Well, I simply brought a rat to the debate, and I said, here's the problem in America. And I pointed out poverty. I was only 32. I got the signatures to get on the New Hampshire primary. And basically, my message was basically front page America, except for the Hartford Current, which didn't cover it. Which shows, in a way, if you're looking back, that a prophet is without honor in his own area. So I was prophetic in what I was talking about. But I didn't know what God had in mind for me. And God had in mind for me was to try to lead a drive for the spiritual conversion of America.
And you mentioned the Hartford Current didn't cover it. Do you think they were anti-Ned? Do you think they just, thought it was,
I think it's theological. A prophet is without an honor in his home area. And it's simple as that. I got a lot of coverage in the Current over the years, but I think that was too bold. Somebody running for president to start with, and on the other hand, that's very, very bold.
But what's your feelings about the Current these days? How do you view their, the paper itself?
Well, I don't know what you should call it. I can't see you calling it the Hartford Current, because it doesn't cover Hartford. On the other hand, it doesn't. And most of the editors are yuppies on a rise. And I think that pay attention to some of the reporters. But the Hartford Current is part of a conglomerate. Just like the conglomerates in power in America, President of Travelers doesn't work in Travelers. President of Travelers works out in New York City, and everybody thinks he's up in that White Tower. He's not. So a conglomerate owns Travelers. So you see what conglomerates do. They destroy the personal relationship of people. That's why there's so much apathy, because people don't think they can do anything. And I say they can, but they better start asking God to help them.
I've known you for a few years, and at times you come across as a little eccentric, a little bit crazy sometimes, but what you say really resonates with me, with people. Would you ever change your approach? Do you think, the way you, your personality is who you are, and that's worked for you, and what you see is what you get? Well,
the thing is, the force that ultimately controls the world, which isn't spoken a lot about, even from pulpits, is Satan. And Satan is the spirit of evil. And a prophet is supposed to speak out against Satan. A prophet's not supposed to be a nice guy. He's supposed to go after it. On the other hand, if he's just going after it, then he gets too cynical. He gets too cynical. Yeah. He has to also turn to Christ, because Christ was the most loving force in the history of the world.
I just want a couple more points. You've walked across the state carrying posters promoting the need for more priests. In light of the sexual scandals involving Catholic priests, what's your view of the Catholic Church today?
Well, I think the Catholic Church, I think the Catholic Church is pretty solid, especially with the Pope Francis. On the other hand, one of our goals is to go after a major ploy of Satan. For example, New York City, we want to call God City. And the reason we want to call that God City is we wanted to at least match L.A. But here we have the focal point in America. New York City originally was going to be called Sin City.
Well, I got a minute 30 left, but more specifically about the sexual scandals, how do you view that? What do you say about that?
One out of the 12 apostles betrayed Christ, and a certain amount of priests betrayed Christ. I would say 1 out of 12, but the thing is, that was 10 years ago, those scandals and so forth. We've got to think in terms of some of the hardest working people I've seen are Catholic priests, and I would say different if I thought so.
Okay, less than a minute, the Ned Coll legacy. I know you're not going anywhere for a while.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, how would you, on that note then, how would you like to be remembered? How would you like to be, when people think of Ned Coll and everything you've done, and what do you?
I would like that people to think that the guy lived his faith, and he lived it, and he got the joy out of it, and he got the power out of it, and hopefully other people will get that same joy, because faith gives power and joy. And I'm a joyous man that's 74 years old. The other thing, too, we don't realize that people older, they can have sex and a lot of other things. And
we didn't talk about sex.
No. The fact of the matter is that we have a massive amount of our population who don't think they can do anything in their lives.
Yeah.
And they've been conditioned by corporate that they're out of the loop.
Are we still talking about sex now?
No, we're talking about one of the biggest biases in America is against age.
Age, okay. Thank you, Ned. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Ned Coll, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.